Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter. I'm the founder and executive director of Courage 365, and we have a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be interviewing David Pittman. I'm going to read his bio a little bit before we get into some commercial breaks, before we have him join us on the show. But I have known David for quite a few years. I want to say since maybe 2014, 2015, something around that timeline. And he is a prolific advocate. He has done so many amazing things. He's a survivor himself. And our conversation today is going to focus on male survivors and also what is happening inside of the Southern Baptist Convention. He's a survivor with a pastor connected to that movement. And so he's done a lot of really powerful advocacy work in the last couple of weeks, really for the last couple of years, but you've probably seen him on the news and in various articles very recently. And I just want him to come on the show and give us sort of a recap of what is happening in the Southern Baptist Convention, the abuse scandals that have come out. And I think this is going to be really helpful if you have been seeing little bits and pieces from news articles, but really want kind of a high-level overview so you can understand what is really happening and where we're at today with the advocacy movement to help survivors within that denomination. So let me get into his bio. So David Pittman is a survivor of sexual abuse perpetrated by a Southern Baptist minister. He is the director of Together We Heal and part of the Safeguarding Initiative team at Grace. He teaches churches, schools, and families how to talk with their kids about sexual abuse, how to identify predatory behavior, and how to properly respond to victims and to perpetrators. So again, this is going to be a really powerful show. You're going to want to stay with us and tune in for the entire thing. If you are watching this while we are live or you're catching the replay, either way, we welcome you. Please go ahead and hit share. If you're watching this on social media or if you're watching this on YouTube, click that link so you can take that and actually put that on social media, because this is going to be important for your friends and family to see. All right, we're going to come back with David in just a few minutes, but let's take a break for these messages.
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing CalmiGo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using CalmiGo today.
Talk about it. I was told not to talk about it.
So I'm here to talk about it.
Because I can't stay quiet.
I was able to break my silence.
Because of those who refuse to stay quiet.
I am a businesswoman.
Activist.
Survivor.
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 Waking up every day in fear, living in a constant cycle of self-doubt and anxiety. We at Courage 365 know that this is what it's like for many survivors of abuse. The abuse may be over, but the healing journey has just begun. After getting professional support, the next most important step is finding a supportive community. And that's why we've created Courage Clubs. Courage Clubs are free online peer support groups created by survivors for survivors. Courage Clubs are for adults who have survived abuse and wish to build supportive community with other survivors. Each month, we discuss a new topic with helpful tools and resources for your healing journey. We can't promise your healing journey will be easy, but we can promise you don't have to do it alone. Hey David, thank you so much for joining us on the Courage Conversation Show. It's been such an amazing thing to see you in action over the last couple of weeks and to have followed your work for years. Really appreciate you taking time because I know you're probably exhausted after all the advocacy work you've been doing lately.
Yeah, it was a little overwhelming in Anaheim. That just speaking from the heart there. It was a little overwhelming, but we're back home and we're getting our batteries recharged.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for myself when I've done different protests or even when I'm speaking at conferences, those types of things, like when there's a lot of intense energy around advocacy, you kind of have this adrenaline build up and it kind of gives you the strength to get through it. But then it's just like a cliff just drops off afterwards. And
Big crash.
yes, it's so exhausting. So I know you've just come back from the Southern Baptist Convention, like really just a few days ago. So really honored that you would make time kind of after that big thing to talk with us.
Yeah,
But
this will be my last of the interviews for a while, I promise.
yeah, you totally deserve a break. But yeah, I think it's really valuable for you to be on the show because of your expertise, because of your history of advocacy, your experience and knowledge. But you have actually been at the Southern Baptist Convention. And I think some of our listeners have probably seen different articles in the newspaper. Some of them follow along with different media coverage of that. But would you kind of tell us what the heck is going on in the Southern Baptist Convention right now and just kind of give people an overview of this whole mess, because it really is a mess?
Sure. Well, I think it's important that we go back about a year. And that's when the convention as a whole was it seemed like they were at least beginning to acknowledge, right? Oh, we do have a problem here, right? And so they were trying to decide what to do about that, and they decided to form a sexual abuse task force. Well, what to do with that? Well, what are we gonna, what is it gonna focus on? And they ran into these hurdles because the Southern Baptist Convention is not like most other denominations because they don't even consider themselves a denomination. With this hierarchical structure like the Roman Catholic Church, you got the Pope and the bishops and on down the line, and everybody answers to an ultimate. And the Southern Baptists are not set up that way. Each church is in of itself its own little kingdom with its own little pope, if you will, right? They've got these 47,000 independently autonomous cooperating churches is what it's called. And what they do oversee, each one of these is a cooperative. They oversee entities. That includes the seminaries, their North American Mission Board, the International Mission Board. But most significantly with regard to all of this is the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee is what actually manages their day-to-day functions, pays the bills, or distributes the monies to all these organizations. And all of those, they do and can be investigated, right? Mm. And you think of it like a regular election year, where the delegates from the state go and cast their votes as representatives of the state. It's right. The exact same thing in the SBC, only they're called messengers. The messengers go from the church and they cast their votes at the convention to what they're going to do, right? They say what they believe, what they want to do. And last year, these messengers voted to have an independent third-party investigation of the Southern Baptist Convention's Executive Committee. So it's very specific. And that's where, if you've heard the name Guidepost Solutions, that's where they come in. But here's where another snag entered. The little thing called waiving attorney-client privilege came up because there was a large enough portion of this executive committee, and keep in mind, they were the ones saying, we want ourselves investigated. We think there's something going on here. And all of the lawyers, of course, the Joe Knott lawyers of the executive committee and the leaders of the executive committee, the chair and all of the ones around that, they didn't want to waive, and they fought heavily against it. In the end, it was waived. And now we know why the ones that were fighting against it were, right? Long story short, attorney-client privilege was waived, and in that, combined with all of the testimony and evidence that was given to Guidepost, there was this mountain of evidence, correspondence, emails going back and forth between the attorneys, and it was all cover-ups and lies. So it was a hugely significant investigation. It's a 288-page document that Guidepost provided. And they also found that one of the executives, Aguibodo, was keeping a list, had over 700 names of sexual predators on it, all the while publicly telling us, no, for reasons of church polity, we can't keep a list. So we were being lied to. So Guidepost Solutions, they do this, they hand over this 7/8 month investigation, all of these findings, and they make 10 pages worth of recommendations to the Sexual Abuse Task Force. The Sexual Abuse Task Force whittles that down to 3, and then the messengers at the convention, after passing some amendments, take it down to 2. So all of that work, right? The first thing they of those 2 resolutions, the first was to create another task force to implement sexual abuse initiatives, and the second was the creation of what they call Ministry Check, and that's going to be a website that will track a record of convicted and credibly accused, with the hopes of preventing predators from moving from church to church.
Now, I want to pause you there because there's a couple things that I think were really important that you said, and I want people to catch this. Number one, the abuse has been going on for probably as long as the Southern Baptist has existed. I'm sure that it has, especially since it was founded on the idea of slavery and continuing slavery. So it goes back very, very far. And advocacy work has been happening for, what, like 20 years or so, something in that ballpark?
Right, I would say that's a good number. Yeah,
around there. And there's been a lot of fighting, and then fighting to get where we are today. And so last year they agreed to have an investigation, and I think it's interesting. I've had to when I've spoken to reporters, I've had to clarify this with them, that it is only the executive committee that was investigated. Right. Because I think there's sometimes an assumption that it's the whole Southern Baptist Convention. Oh, no. It was one committee within their orbit. There's many others, like you mentioned, and this isn't including the investigation of all the churches that are attached. So
extremely limited.
Very, very limited.
And only from 2000 to 2022.
Oh, yeah, that's important also, because like we said, it's been going on for as long as it's been in existence. So then you have 10 pages of recommendations. Those 10 pages are whittled down to 3. Only 2 of those 3 suggestions. Then those are whittled down to 2. And then those still have to have action steps taken with them. And I even have concerns about how those action steps will be taken. Can we trust their committee to do the right thing? Can we trust them to keep a database? We've talked about a database for many years, if anybody's been following this movement, but can we trust them because of all their lying and those types of things? And so it seems like good things are being proposed, but I also still have some skepticism. Like, we've whittled this down to such a little thing, and are they even going to follow through and do those things properly? That's kind of a concern I have. And I think you did a brilliant overview, but I wondered, before you continue, if you had any comment on that.
Well, no, those are I've even, I was telling you, I had some notes here for, you've actually covered a couple of those things that were in the notes.
Oh, well, sorry.
No, I didn't mean it that way. It's like that you absolutely, so go further than that, into what you just said, the concerns. What every survivor I've talked with, one of the concerns is, okay, so you're going to continue with investigation and you're doing this. Are you going to do this in a trauma-informed way?
Right.
That's the biggest question. Or is it simply going to go back to what it was before? A survivor comes to you, it's not handled in a trauma-informed way. The result of which is they're either re-victimized or they're silenced. Even let's say best intentions, because it's not done in a trauma-informed way, silence or traumatization occurs. And so absolutely you have a right to be concerned. We are all concerned. That is one of the biggest issues that we have, is that the way it's going to be handled. So that's why so many of us are trying to develop some kind of relationships with within people that are in the Southern Baptist Convention, that some of the people who are actually going to be doing these things,
Yeah.
in the hopes that we can teach them, just like Rachel Den Hollander and I and Todd Benkert, we did a whole hour-long breakout session in Anaheim, where we talked about what does trauma-informed care in the ministry look like. What is it? What is it, and what is it not? And how can you go about doing these things? So we're trying to educate them. We're trying to bring them along because we don't want our fellow survivors and the ones who have yet to be harmed but will be, we know,
Right.
because this, we all of us who have done this work for so long know that sexual abuse isn't a Southern Baptist problem. It's not a Roman Catholic problem. It's not a women's sports problem. It's a human problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Any place where there's children and parent and adults are putting authority over them, there are going to be sexual predators. Right. So, but we are working because we know this organization, and that's why we're trying to develop this, because, we don't want to see other kids have happened to them what happened to us. Right.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I guess that kind of goes into my second question. We've already covered a lot of this, but I have so much skepticism. And what would you say maybe to survivors who are skeptical? And then what would you maybe say to regular church people who are not survivors, who feel really proud of themselves that they're at this point? What kind of messages would you maybe give them? And perhaps they're the same, perhaps they're different.
Well, I'm a little different than most, maybe a lot of my fellow advocates. I don't believe in institutional change. I just don't. And because I have to ask, let's ask the honest question: how much since Spotlight has the Roman Catholic Church changed?
Right.
How much since Larry Nassar has USA Gymnastics really changed, or the USA Olympic? How much are they really protected? How much has the Boy Scouts of America really changed? Right? We can't quantify any of those things because they are still protecting and they're not transparent. So we can't know. So we'll never really know until we hear of other victims that are coming out. And so for that reason, I have great doubt in those. Here's what I do believe in. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing any of this. I do believe in individuals who want to do the right thing. I believe in individual churches that want to do the right thing. I work with them all year long, right? We do safeguarding training. We help teach them help them develop a written policy that they can implement, that is actionable, that teaches them how to better identify predatory behavior, how to properly respond to the predators and to the victims. So there are churches and there are people. I'll even go one step further. There are state conventions within the Southern Baptist Convention who have reached out and said, can you please teach us the things that we need to know, right? We don't know what we need to know. And here's some things we've tried. Is that the right, are we doing right there? And they're teachable, right? So, so there are certain places and things, and that to me is where, like somebody that wants to look for a place to do work, that's what I would say. Work with, do you know how many survivors just need to find a good trauma-informed therapist? Help them one-on-one, help them find that, help them find access to the funds or the money to be able to pay that. Because we all know that the healthcare in this country is a joke when it comes to mental health care. And so most, even if they have money, can't find one, or if they can find one, don't have money. So work on that and have hope and try to see those things through.
That's good.
Yeah, that would be where I would focus it on.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. And I agree with you 100%. I don't really believe in institutional change for institutions that have been built out of corruption, which I would deem the Southern Baptist Convention and honestly most institutions that I know. Um, and I think the focus has to be caring for survivors. And sometimes I think we have to make our voices really loud and call out institutions, not because there's necessarily an expectation that the institution is going to change, but that our voices being raised and amplified will reach new survivors, new people who would potentially become allies if they knew what was happening. And so I love what you're saying there and focusing more on the individual. Yeah, and I just want to really quick plug the Baptist Accountability Database, and Megan and Don Benninger have started that. They have a whole database of Baptist predators that they're adding to the list all the time. They don't have SBC money backing them, and so there's not that bias of when something is run by the institution who's harming people. So that's something that I would pitch out there for people looking to track predators as well.
Love them both. Love them both. Love the work they're doing. So grateful. So grateful for the work they're doing.
They're so amazing. Yeah. So I guess I want to change the subject a little bit. I think this kind of dovetails with what we were talking about, but I've noticed that there are a lot of conversations happening about the women who've been abused in the Southern Baptist Convention. And those conversations should happen. Those should not stop. We should have more of those. And also, at the same time, a lot of times the conversations about boys and even men being abused within the Southern Baptist Convention or in general. I see that there's not as much media coverage of stories like that many times, and there's not as much advocacy surrounding that. And so I guess my question here is, can we just talk about men and boy survivors? Women's stories need to be told. We are not diminishing that at all, but we need to level up our conversation around men and boys. Why do you think, particularly in Protestant church environments, that's not discussed as much? Because in the Catholic Church, I hardly ever heard stories in the media about girls experiencing abuse, though I've talked to many survivors in the Catholic Church that were women. But on the Protestant side of things, in Southern Baptist Convention, whether it's Independent Fundamentalist Baptist, whether it's, I see this split, and I'm very curious, like, this conversation needs to happen. Do you have any idea why it's not happening equal to women survivors conversation, and maybe if there's a difference between denominations?
Well, I'm not sure that I wouldn't even say that it's boys are overlooked in SBC versus Catholic. I think boys are overlooked in everywhere, in every organization.
Yeah.
Even though the numbers, 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, right? The numbers are not very different.
Right.
I think boys, the only reason why you've heard more about boys in the Catholic Church, I believe, is because of Spotlight, right? I don't, if it had not been for that investigation, you still wouldn't have heard about those boys.
Right. Right.
I think it's this kind of this lack of basic awareness, information, understanding, there's no open conversation about the specific challenges that men face, that abused boys face. Because look, as a kid growing up in a fundamentalist, conservative, Southern Baptist church, we didn't even talk about sex, much less sex abuse. I never even heard the words childhood sexual abuse put together until I was an adult, and I was trying to figure these things out. And most boys, right, from the day we're born, you got to be a man, you be tough, you don't. So when we end up being victimized, we have no idea how to handle that because we haven't been taught that, right, that we could be a victim. And many, if not most boys, are never taught the difference between masculinity and just being a good man.
Mm.
They're also taught, we are also taught, just, fight or free. I mean, fight or flee, right? That's
Yeah.
the only two options as a man.
Right.
But now we know better, right? And now that
Mhm.
we can explain, no, you can freeze, you can fawn. There are other, and they are no less legitimate
Mhm.
responses in a moment of danger.
Yeah.
Um, Freezing is what I did. It. But I think maybe the most important point that I'm trying to build to is that so when a boy is molested or raped, because I wish we would stop using the benign phrases, because I think if we express to people exactly what happens, I was raped,
Mm. Yeah.
right? Um, People need to understand that truth and stop using the euphemisms, because
Right.
I think that's what makes them more comfortable. And I think
Mhm.
we need to, Christ himself said, even, if you want to talk from the Christian community, Christ didn't call these folks to lead a comfortable life. He called
Right.
them to live an uncomfortable one. So let's encourage that thought
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
and theology and make them uncomfortable to understand. Okay, I won't harp on that because I'll get on a sidetrack. It's on my
Under-
soapboxes. It gets
yeah.
me.
No, it's good. It's all good.
Um, so when a boy is raped, or even on the lower end of the spectrum, molested, um, his body, right? There is a physiological response to an external stimuli to the penis.
Right.
That is the way the male human body was created, right?
Mm.
This is grown-ups, we understand it, but we don't teach our children that.
Yeah.
We won't even say the name penis. We'll go, it's a pee-pees and woo-woos and hee-hees. No,
Mhm.
folks, it's a penis, a vagina, breast. Say the
Yeah.
words again. Quit using the euphemism so that people will talk. But this thing occurs, right? And so you got this factor, this thing occurs and we don't teach them. And the second part is that even little boys are held responsible for when
Mm.
you got an erection, so you must have enjoyed it. It couldn't have been that. Boys can't be raped, right? You
Right.
have all of these two simultaneous factors. And here's what it all boils down to. An erection does not equal consent.
Yes. Yeah. Say that again.
An erection does not equal consent.
True. So
and
true.
and if we could just get folks to understand that about it. And then, oh, by the way, throw in, you mind if I read a quote it's from a
Please. Yeah.
mutual. Brian Cardoza said some things, so
Yeah.
I'm going to look down here. I want to read this. He said
Brian is
this.
great, by the way. Yeah.
Love Brian.
Great.
He said, I think there are very few things that are unique to male survivors. Trauma is human centric, not gender specific. I've never met a woman that didn't experience the first 10 to 12 things that I have: guilt, denial, anger, etc. What I do think is inherently unique, and maybe the biggest difference between male and female victims of sexual abuse, is that it causes a man to question himself about a fundamental issue. Let's get a little. A person's sexuality is core to who they are, and when a boy is sexually abused by a man, it almost always causes him to ask the question, does that mean I'm gay?
Hmm.
And that is a huge thing on this, because these struggles of sexuality, they cause a boatload of internal struggles.
Right.
May have never had any thoughts about that. And to
Mhm.
me, the biggest part is, if you identify as a heterosexual, you wonder, does it mean I'm gay? And if you identify as homosexual, the guys that I've talked to, it makes them wonder, well, was I really born this way, or was I made this way?
Right.
And all of these confusions, the struggles, it's led to a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
Whether it be unintentional, the way I was going, I was just consuming so many narcotics so I didn't have to think about it, and overdosing that could have been my demise, or or the guys who take their own lives because they have no one that they feel understands them. They have no one that they feel loves them, and they feel that isolation and alone. That why we do this.
Right.
I hate Ashley. I hate talking about this stuff. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
It disgusts me when I have to describe what happened to me. But I know that if I do this, there's going to be someone listening to your show,
Mm,
and they're going to realize that they're not alone, right?
yeah. Yeah.
That's why we do it. We said it a minute ago, the individuals. That's why we do this.
Absolutely. Wow. That's really powerful. And I think it brought up something for me with women survivors. Just because of anatomy, but also because of the expectations men are given in society to kind of be able to get pleasure. There's, like you said, there's like a masculine identity often wrapped around that. On the other side, with women, there are so many women who go through their life and never have an orgasm in their entire life and have a very hard time having enjoyable sex. And it can be hard for women, I think, sometimes to, like, they almost have the opposite side of things, because a rape may not feel pleasurable, but also consensual sex may not feel pleasurable to them. And it's interesting that for men and boys, a lot of times it does feel pleasurable, whether it is or is not consensual, and just how confusing that can be for people. Because ideally, we would all have consensual sex that feels good. That is kind of
That's the way we were designed.
Yes. There are, some asexual people who are not into that. I respect that, totally.
True.
But for most
Yeah,
people,
absolutely.
yeah. For most people, that's how it's supposed to be. But when you have sexual abuse that comes in, it so much confuses your body, and it can be hard. It can take so many years to deal with that trauma and to separate what is actually feeling good to me, because that is how I am.
It rewires your brain.
Yeah, it really does. And it can make it incredibly difficult for people to have functioning sexual lives or enjoyable sexual lives. Now, that does not mean that you cannot overcome those things. You can't work through them with therapy. But I think maybe that's even a whole other soapbox conversation. It's just like people healing and having regular sexual experiences without having it attached to trauma. And I really appreciate you highlighting that, because I could see how that would be very confusing to men and boys. And like you said, it's very much connected to the way society positions what it means to be a man. And so that's like even an identity piece that is then kind of being questioned. And that's a lot.
Right.
That's a lot. Yeah. And so, kind of an adjacent topic, I want to shift to talking about consent. And we've talked about consent a lot on this show. And there's a broader conversation that's starting to happen in media around consent, which I really appreciate. But what I see a lot of times happening is when we talk about consent, it's like women deserve to give consent and men need to wait to receive consent from the woman before they engage with them. But there's not a lot of conversations that I have seen that men also have a right to give or revoke consent for themselves. And so we're right on that one half, but we're missing the complete other half. And it should really be a conversation about, like, both people have an opportunity to say, yes, I consent to this, or no, I don't. And both people have a responsibility to respect what the other person wants or doesn't want. So I guess maybe that was a long conversation. Like, what are your thoughts around why we teach girls this in some more progressive circles, but we often don't teach boys that they also have this right? Like, what is missing from that conversation? Why is it like that? And just,
Right.
Yeah.
So go back to what we were saying earlier, right? Go back to the individual. there shouldn't be, like we said, there's no difference in the numbers of abuse.
Right.
And so if we go back to first ourselves and we say, okay, whether I am a guy or girl, whatever identification, I don't want to leave anyone out.
Sure.
So, right. I it's not just about me, I need to, so you got to really have to go back to being a prince. Are you normalizing the conversation? I guess that's, if I really try, and because I know we only have a limited amount of time here. So kid walks in the door,
Yeah.
right? You ask them a normal question. How was your day? Right? Normal question. How are things at school? Did you make up with Jack and so about the argument you were having? Normal question. What needs to be normalized? Did anybody make you feel uncomfortable today? Right? Did anybody touch you in a way that hurts you? If we normalize, if you, have we taught them their body safety? Have the boys, have we taught them just like we do with the girls? Right? So if we don't, until we start teaching boys the same things about their body and it being theirs, and for them, and until we start normalizing these questions of sexual abuse and not just sexual abuse, period, right? Until we normalize those, until we start teaching, there's going to be issues with that, with boys not understanding that they have the right to say no. That to me, because I damn sure promise you this, right? If parents continue to not normalize, they continue to not have these conversations because they feel uncomfortable, because they don't want to talk about that. Well, you know what? They're gonna feel really uncomfortable when their child has come forward that once they've been abused. It's really uncomfortable then. So how about just working through a little discomfort now? And being honest, because I promise you, kids, I learned this a long time ago from someone who's very wise. This is not my wisdom at all. This is someone I have so much respect for. He said this: if a child is old enough to ask the question, they're old enough to get the truth. Child is old enough to ask the question, they're old enough to get the truth. And I think you take that and go even further. I believe you cannot start teaching early enough. You cannot. Because in those earliest days is when children take in the most. So if you have normalized it then, if you have taught them then, well, then when they're 8, 9, and 10, or 12 and 15, guess what? Those conversations are not uncomfortable then.
Right. Absolutely.
And boys and girls can consent, and boys and girls can be safer.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. And as you were saying that, I was thinking through like just some of our cultural ideas around consent, and also what is accepted for boys and not for girls. One thing that I hear a lot is don't hit girls. Well, absolutely, don't hit girls. But there's not the same stigma with punching another boy. There's not that
almost
same
encouraged.
Stigma. Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah. Right. And so they got it right on don't punch girls. Like, let's not stop teaching that. But also, like, we should teach that for all humans, not just girls. Like, boys' bodies matter as well. And I don't know. That just kind of brings me down a whole train of thought of how our society socializes people and what they socialize them to accept or not accept. And just violence is something that men and boys are often socialized to perpetrate and to accept. And many boys and men do not perpetrate violence, and that's amazing. But there's still this other thing that's like, well, that's just kind of what boys do. They punch each other. That's how they solve their problems. I've even heard comedians joke about that. They're like, women are just backbiting and they gossip and all this kind of stuff, but men and boys, they just punch it out and then they're friends afterwards. Well, that's not exactly a great strategy for dealing with conflict. And that's not a conversation about consent or about caring for other people or just communication skills. And I think a lot of times men and boys aren't socialized to be given good communication skills. They're expected to just express it physically when that's not really helpful in the long term. It's really not helpful. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm with you.
So many thoughts. Yeah.
I agree.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I want to kind of close our conversation a little bit. And Courage 365, we try to prioritize community. That's a big thing for us. We've had in-person conferences since COVID. We've had online conferences. We have our groups. We have our text message group where people can connect, and our online peer support groups, courage clubs. And I think that it is so important to people's healing. Like, I really don't think that you can heal in isolation. I think there has to be some sort of a community piece to it. But what I see a lot of times is groups have a lot of women in them, which is good, and that's not a discouragement. But a lot of times men and boys aren't offered groups, or they may not feel comfortable coming to a group. And so maybe can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of community, not just for women, but for men and boys too, and what we can do as an advocacy community to maybe foster more opportunities for that?
I'll give you a bad story first. When I was at my earliest coming forward, and I was really struggling, and there was nothing. I was finding nothing online. I was finding, and maybe it was part of it was I didn't know how to look, because eventually I found Snap. But prior to finding them, I even went to a rape crisis center.
Mm.
You should have seen the looks I got walking into a rape crisis center.
Mm.
And I was told unpolitely to leave.
Wow.
That there was nothing, there was no help for me there, and I needed to leave. That's just an exaggerated real life example of how guys feel when we're trying to reach out for help. Yeah. Even today, right? There are, at least with women, they may not be good, right? But there are some basic bottom level foundational care in pretty much any city you go to. Right. Good luck if trying to find you can't. It's not the same case with guys.
Yeah.
So that's my horror story about it. The good news is that there are, like 1 in 6 is a great organization. They have some online support. And let me say, first of all, peer support to me, I think is as important, if not more important, than trauma. Having also, not in addition to trauma-informed therapy, right? I have needed both to keep me alive and sane. Well, as sane as I'll ever be, but but seriously, I've needed. If it weren't for Krista Brown's words and relationship, I would be dead right now. I have no doubt of that, because until then, I didn't hear or read. I read her words, and in that I read my story. Yeah. And so that's the moment I knew I wasn't alone. And she gave me direction. Here, go look at this. Go look at Snap. Snap, same thing. Dave Cloissy, Barbara Blaine, Barb Doris saved my life. That's the impact that I believe peer support has. It can and will save you if you can find it and be a part of it, because I know you can be a part of it if you find it, because they will accept you and love you and support you in every way. So that's the key, right? So is finding them.
Yeah.
1 in 6 does have in the bristlecone project that's kind of connected to that. And you know, let me go because I even made a note. I was trying to see if there was something that I could give you. Go to, you can go to our website, the Together We Heal, and under resources, you will see some places that because we're talking to a worldwide audience, right? We're no
Yeah.
longer just here in our little
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
It's a worldwide audience. So we've got places on there for people in the UK, Australia, and we made a contact with a therapist, a trauma informed therapist in Moscow. This was
Wow.
years ago. We still keep in touch with her, even in spite of everything that's going on.
Wow.
She's able to, at least we're emails, we get through to each
Yeah.
other, and connected her with people in Moscow.
Wow.
So look, go to our site, go to your site, use that resources page. And if you don't see, can't find what you're looking for, then email us, call us. We will help you find, we'll help you connect. That's what we do.
That's amazing. Yes.
It's
And
essential.
yeah. Yeah. And your organization is amazing, Together We Heal. And we'll definitely have that linked in the show notes and below this video. So everybody definitely check that out. Are there other places that they can find you and your work online?
We also work with Grace.
Okay.
They've got some links to both. We just recently did a really good series on those 6 steps of trauma informed care, right? The sympathy and transparency, going through each and every one. And I'm in a couple of them, but there are some people who have far superior knowledge and insight. And please take a look at those. It's on the YouTube channel with Grace. You can go to their website and see that. They have some great information there as well.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you for that. And the last question I want to ask you, this is one that we ask all our guests, is what is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received? And it could be something recent, it could be something that you heard a long time ago, but just something that really stuck with you that you'd want to share with us.
All right. First thing, and I know immediately. So when people come forward, they're typically, there was for me, and there's for a lot that I know, it's like someone who is just getting clean or sober from alcohol or drugs, right? You immediately want to, man, now that you've been given life back, right? You've been given your life back.
Yeah.
You want to go now and help everybody else get theirs. Pause. Best advice I got was, just like they teach an alcoholic or an addict, don't get in a relationship for at least a year, right?
Right.
Same thing with a survivor. Don't try to jump into any advocacy for at least a year. Give for me, I took almost 5 years of just spending time in rooms with other survivors, with my therapist. I focused on my healing because that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
Focus on your healing for at least a year, maybe more, if whatever time you need, right? Yeah. And then when you had, right, step 2 of that is, don't talk about anything that you don't know about. No matter how much you're going to want to help and solve, talk from your experience, from your knowledge, or the things that you're learning along the way.
Right.
Because, people see through BS real quickly.
Yeah.
And so you'll do more damage than good if you try to speak about the things you don't know. So take time to heal, as much time as you need. Don't jump the gun. And then once you go forward, just focus on the things. Learn what your voice is. Don't try to be Ashley's or Dave's or anybody else's. Just be you. That's all any of us need from you, is to be you.
That's powerful. Thank you, David, so much for being on the show today. This has been enlightening, and I know from our conversation around the SBC to men and boys survivors, this is really going to hit home for a lot of people. So I thank you for your time, and thank you for letting us be your last stop on your media tour for the last couple of advocacy weeks. So, yes.
Thank you. Ashley, as always, a joy. Tell Will I said hello.
All right, I'll do it. Okay, and everybody, please go ahead and follow David on his social media. We'll make sure to link that below. And you can also follow us on our social media, Courage 365. So we have a YouTube, we have a Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter account. And you can find us there. We post content in all those different mediums on a regular basis. But in addition to that, you can pop on over to our website, which is courage365.org. And just for being a guest on our website, you can download this free ebook, which is 5 Keys to Living a Life of Courage. This can help you take your next most courageous steps in your survivor healing journey. We have so many other resources available in just a couple of weeks, depending on when this show airs. We are having another one of our peer survivor support groups, which is called Courage Clubs. That is completely free. It is a support group for survivors, by survivors. We have a curriculum that we go through and talk about different topics of healing. It is always the first Wednesday of the month, and it is always at 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to sign up, you do have to register. Like I said, it's totally free, but you do have to register. Just go to our website, courage365.org/clubs, or when you get there, just click the clubs tab. And one more thing that I want to pitch to you today, something that we're really proud of and that we have found has been so helpful for people in our survivor community. We've created a text message list. These are also free from us, and we send out encouraging, empowering text messages every morning, Monday through Friday. These are text messages created by survivors for survivors. We don't spam you. You're not in a long list with other people's messages going back and forth. It is just from us, and you can even respond to us if you want to. And to do that, like I said, it's totally and completely free. Just pull out your phone and with me, just open up to where you create a new text message form. In there, in the top section, you're going to type a number. So get ready, pull out your phone, move over to the text message, create a new message. All right, now in the number form, you're gonna type in 917-809-7311. That is 917-809-7311. And then what you're gonna do in the message section is you're just gonna simply type the word courage. When you do that and you hit send, it's going to automatically add you to our text message list, and you'll start receiving those text messages every morning. We've had people saying that this has really gotten them through times of depression, just always having that little encouragement in the morning. We've had people say thank you for the free resources we often send in there, and something that if we ever skipped a day by accidentally, not posting, we'll have people reach out because they miss it so much. I would love for you to be on that text message list, because I think it could really be a bright spot in your morning. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, be sure to check out David Pittman and his work at Together We Heal, and we will see you next time. Live with courage.